The post-classic era of the show is most notably recognized for the amount of change that was being taken place every season, and Survivor Panama, Exile Island is no exception to that, as this season had 4 starting tribes for the first time ever, expands on the hidden immunity idol found in Guatemala, and having a more fine-tuned Exile Island that was first found in Palau. There's obviously a lot to get through with this one, as we also have some of the craziest characters Survivor had ever seen, with Terry Dietz, Courtney Merritt, Shane Powers, and of course, the fan favorite Cirie Fields. And that right there is the entire point of this video, as I want to highlight not only how Cirie changed Survivor forever, but is also the greatest player to never win the game.
Cirie? Yeah. Tribe has spoken.
Welcome back to another episode of Survivor Retrospective, a daily series on this channel where we'll be looking back at all 40 seasons of Survivor every single day leading up to the premiere of Survivor Season 41 airing September 22nd. If you're new to the channel, in today's video we'll be looking back at Survivor Panama, but I've already made videos covering the first 11 seasons of the show, and while not mandatory, if you like your stories complete, I recommend checking out all the previous videos as they all lead into each other. I have a link down in the description containing all these videos in the series. If you're a returning viewer, then hey, thanks for coming back. I really like how the Survivor Guatemala video turned out, being under 10 minutes long, and because making daily videos is overwhelming, I think that's a really good format. I'm going to try to stick to that for most of my videos, and I would love any and all constructive criticism in the comments on how I can improve these videos every single day. But with all the housekeeping out of the way, let's finally dive into it.
9 days, 16 people, 1 survivor.
The characters are what make or break a season of reality television, and the characters of Survivor Panama 100% without a doubt make the season as enjoyable as it already is. And although I would argue how the characters are separated into tribes is a flop, I think everyone would agree that the characters themselves are able to save the rough starting tribes that took place. We will touch on the starting tribe format near the end of the video, but for now I want to give appreciation to the Kasaya 6. And Terry Dietz, of course. Obviously, the biggest and craziest players from the season come from the Kasaya 6, and they might be the craziest alliance of Survivor players of all time. I think we need to at least touch on every single one of them for a brief moment.
Funny thing is, these are the people that you guys decided to align with, and now you hate each other. How stupid is that?
Although Bruce is crazy in his own right, I think as far as fun Survivor players to watch on TV, he's probably at the bottom of the list here, as all the characters we'll be discussing today. And so, as much as it's sad to see him get medevaced on day 25, I think this might be the perfect spot for him to go, as it leaves us with the better Survivor players for the rest of the season. Did I say better Survivor players? Sorry, I meant interesting Survivor players, as I think interesting is exactly what Courtney's whole vibe is all about. I mean, Courtney's whole thing in the bottom half of the season is everybody wants to take her to the end because she is such a big goat, and that right there is the exact brilliance that Cirie is able to figure out with the amazing tribal council when Courtney is blindsided. I want to talk about Cirie last out of all these characters, but for now, let me just say 3, 2, 1.
Courtney, your tribe has spoken. Time for you to go.
If you thought Courtney was crazy, then I want you to fasten your seatbelts and hold on tight, as Shane Powers is even crazier. I don't want to dive into the complete history of Shane getting dragged along by Survivor producers to possibly come back for an all-star season, but then finally not making the cut last minute, but I just want to say that Shane Powers not coming back for an all-star season is easily one of the biggest misses in Survivor history, as this guy is entertainment gold. Whether it be quitting smoking on day 1 of the season or talking to his BlackBerry, I believe Shane Powers to be a great addition to this cast and one of the greatest one-time characters of all time.
I'm wiped out. I want a cigarette, I want a coffee, I want to have a big sandwich, I want to call my kid, I want to tell him I love him, and it's just the stupidest thing I ever did in my whole life.
We're going to be taking a break from the Kasaya 6 for a brief moment and touch on my boy, Terry Dietz, and I need to be honest, this one hurts me to say, but I don't think Terry comes off well here on TV. When I first watched this season live, I was 7 years old, and Terry was my favorite player on the season by far, and for pretty obvious reasons, as he was a complete challenge threat, winning 5 individual immunity challenges this season, and having the hidden immunity idol as well. But on a rewatch, I think he comes off too arrogant with too big of an ego to be a favorite character with such a fantastic cast of characters overall. However, in the moment, things were so much different here, as Terry was who everyone was cheering on to win the season, but sadly he came up a little too short here as he got betrayed right at the finish line on day 38.
I can take multiple looks? Yes. Oh, you didn't tell us that. With one looking back to the station.
Obviously, Danielle is one of the biggest villains in Survivor history for betraying Terry, right? Obviously, I'm just messing around, but I still think it's bizarre how Danielle ends up on Heroes vs. Villains altogether and ends up as a villain. Although Danielle is one of the smaller characters we have mentioned here, she actually has some pretty iconic moments as she beats Cirie in the fire making challenge, betrays Terry last moment, and really her entire rivalry with Shane.
Get wood, I get the water, I help you guys get snails. What are you talking about?
Danielle, we're not going to have this
Baskauskas.
Aras Baskauskas is one of the youngest male Survivor winners of all time. Well, until Fabio later takes that title away from him. However, the title of one of the youngest Survivor winners of all time comes with a lot of baggage that your regular winner doesn't have to deal with. And for that reason, I can compare the perception that Aras received here in Survivor Panama to a similar perception that Jenna received in Survivor the Amazon. In both of these cases, these players are seen to have an easy life, as everyone views them as spoiled kids. And while in both cases that may be somewhat true, I think Aras gets put in a pretty tough spot here, as the rest of his alliance and ultimately most members of the jury have lived exciting lives, and Aras just didn't have that experience during Survivor Panama. I don't consider Aras to be a weak Survivor winner. In fact, he's probably middle of the road for me, but I think there's something to be said about being a normal person that had to deal with all the such annoying, insane, intense players for so many days and still coming up on top in the end.
Winner of Survivor Exile Island.
Are you ready? Are you ready to discuss it? Please tell me you are ready. 3, 2, 1. Let's discuss Cirie Fields. I already mentioned how I believe Cirie is one of the greatest players to never win Survivor, but a statement like that only makes sense after you think about Cirie's 4-season Survivor journey, going all the way through Exile Island, fans versus favorites, heroes versus villains, and of course, game changers. I'm gonna stick to just talking about Cirie's game here in Survivor Panama, but just know she is a commanding factor in 3 out of the 4 seasons that she appears in. In Survivor Panama, Exile Island, Cirie could have easily been the first person voted out of the season because of her athletic or unathletic ability, and if that happens, we never hear about Cirie ever again. But of course, she was able to get off the couch and survive this first tribal council, and that becomes a regular theme here as Cirie is sneaking her way through multiple votes and ultimately finding a spot in the Castaway Alliance. Obviously, Cirie is a social and strategic mastermind, as her ability to get someone to trust her and then get into their heads is unmatched. But her most game-changing move here this season was voting out Courtney with the famous 3-2-1 vote. It was in Cirie's best interest here to get Courtney out of the game, as everyone saw Courtney as the biggest GOAT and wanted to take her to the end of the game, which ultimately would mean one less spot for Cirie, and not being a physical player, is unlikely she'd win that final challenge. Courtney, Danielle, and Terry all planned to vote out Aras, but Cirie was able to pull Danielle to her side with the help from Aras, meaning that there was now 3 votes for Courtney and 2 votes for Aras. Cirie then continued by leaving Shane out of the loop, and he threw his vote away. The entire process of how this vote went down and Cirie's overall legacy of getting off the couch to play Survivor is exactly how I think she changed Survivor forever.
You each have in your kit a magnesium flint, you have a knife, you have all sorts of kindling and other ways to start a fire, coconut husks, things like that. On my go, you will begin.
Like most seasons throughout the post-classic era of Survivor, Exile Island seems like a weird experiment that could have been a disaster, but ultimately it's the wacky characters of the season that end up redeeming it for me. We have Exile Island, which was truly groundbreaking at the time and would be utilized in one form or another for many seasons to come. And obviously we have the hidden immunity idol, beginning to resemble more of what we see it today. Although the idol here is the super idol and far too powerful for its own good, it'd be a step in the right direction for the greatest addition Survivor would ever make. And really my only negative would be the starting tribe divisions, as I don't think anyone would ever think it'd be a good idea to have 4 tribes of 4 players broken down by gender and age. But Survivor would turn around from this and swap the tribes after a single vote, but in the process ultimately making you ask why they chose to do this in the first place. And although I'm not sure if it's an important detail to highlight or if any of you watching would care to know, but I think another reason I enjoyed this season so much is that it was actually the very first Survivor season I ever watched. I started this season on episode 13 during the loved one's visit, as I specifically remember one Thursday night not being able to sleep and coming downstairs to my parents, watching some show on TV, and seeing people cry about their families, meaning that my first ever Survivor experience was on May 4th, 2006, and I never thought I'd be so invested into this show 15 years later. I think this season has a lot of flaws, and it shouldn't be considered a top tier season, but because of my personal connection to it, I personally consider it at least a good season. If you enjoyed this video at all, then please consider leaving a like, as it really helps me out, and subscribe to the channel with the bell turned on so you never miss any of these Survivor retrospective videos. My final rating for Survivor Panama, Exile Island is a 7.0 out of 10. B tier.